All right, let's talk about something that millions of us sign, often without really reading it, the real estate lease. We're going to pull back the curtain on all that legal jargon and make it super simple, clear, and actually useful for you.
Oh, you know that feeling, right? You finally find the perfect apartment, you're all excited, and then bam, someone hands you this giant stack of paper. Well, that document is basically the official rule book for your new home. And knowing what's inside is absolutely the key to protecting yourself and your security deposit. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll cover what a lease even is. Then, we'll get into the four main types you might run into. After that, we'll look at how you pay rent, what the rules of the game are for you and your landlord, and finally, how to wrap everything up smoothly when it's time to move out.
Okay, let's dive right in. First things first, before we get lost in all the fine print, what exactly is a lease at its core?
So here's the main thing to get. A lease isn't about ownership. It's about possession. It's a contract that says, hey, you have the right to live here for a certain amount of time. In legal terms, this creates something called a leasehold estate. It's a fancy term, but it just means you hold the right to be there, even though the landlord still holds the actual title to the property. Now, you're going to see two words pop up all over that document, lessor and lessee. It's pretty simple. The lessor is the landlord. They're the one giving you the space. And you're the lessee, the tenant, the one receiving the space. Knowing who's who is half the battle when you're reading through this stuff. And for a lease to even be legit, it needs these 5 key ingredients. You need competent parties, basically people who can legally sign a contract. There has to be a clear agreement. You need consideration, which is just a legal way of saying rent. The purpose has to be legal, obviously. And finally, it needs a clear description of the property, which is usually just the address. All right, so not all leases are created equal. Let's get into the different types, because the kind of agreement you have really changes the game when it comes to your rights and, how you can eventually move out. Leases usually fall into one of 4 buckets. The most common one is called an estate for years. Now, don't let the name fool you. It just means it has a specific start date and a specific end date, like a standard 1-year lease. Then you've got your periodic tenancy. That's your classic month-to-month that just keeps renewing. Less common is a tenancy at will, which is way more informal. And the last one, tenancy at sufferance. Yeah, you don't want to be that one. That's when you stay after your lease is up without permission. We'll talk more about why that's a terrible idea in a bit. So you've got your lease type down, but when you write that rent check every month, what exactly are you paying for? Turns out, it's not always the same thing, especially if you look at commercial properties versus residential ones. For pretty much anyone renting a home or an apartment, you're looking at a gross lease. It's super simple. You pay one flat amount for rent, and the landlord deals with the big expenses like taxes and insurance. Now, in the business world, you see a lot of net leases, where the tenant pays their rent plus a chunk of those other costs. So if you're renting a place to live, you can be almost certain you've got a gross lease. Okay, now for the really juicy stuff, the actual rules of the game. What are your rights? What are your landlord's responsibilities? We're going to use Texas law as a great example because their Landlord and Tenant Act lays out the duties for both sides that are, well, non-negotiable. Look, your landlord has some very specific and serious obligations. They have to work hard to fix anything that could mess with your health or safety. That means things like making sure you have hot water, installing smoke alarms in all the right places, and providing basic security like deadbolts and window latches. And these aren't just suggestions, they're the law. And this one is a big one. Seriously, your landlord has to rekey the locks within 7 days of you moving in. Why? So you can be absolutely sure that no previous tenants or anyone else with an old key can just walk into your new home. It's a critical safety measure that's built right into the law. All right, I want you to burn one number into your brain, just one, 30. A landlord in Texas has a maximum of 30 days to get your security deposit in the mail back to you after you've moved out. But that 30-day clock only starts ticking after you've officially moved out and given them a forwarding address. Okay, let's jump to the end of your lease, moving out. This is where things can get a little messy, but if you do it the right way, it's your best shot at getting that full security deposit back.
Here's a tip that'll save you a huge headache. Pay very close attention to the termination clause in your lease. A lot of leases will automatically flip to a month-to-month agreement if you don't give them written notice that you're leaving, usually 30 days ahead of time. And I said written notice. Calling them up isn't enough. You've got to put it in writing.
And whatever you do, don't overstay your welcome. If you don't move out on time, you get this lovely official title, a holdover tenant. Trust me, it's not a good thing. The penalties can be insane. The standard Texas lease, for example, says you could owe up to 3 times the normal daily rent for every single day you stay past your move-out date.
So you want that full security deposit back, right? Here's your 4-step game plan. Give them proper written notice that you're leaving, leave the place in the same shape you got it, besides normal wear and tear, clean everything out. And this is so important, give your landlord your new address in writing so they know where to send the check. Okay, let's talk about a huge, and I mean huge, mistake that people make. You cannot, under any circumstances, just decide not to pay your last month's rent and say, just take it out of the deposit. The law is crystal clear on this. If you do that, you could be on the hook for up to 3 times the rent you didn't pay, plus your landlord's legal fees. So yeah, always pay your last month's rent. So after all this, what's the bottom line? A lease isn't just some annoying piece of paper you have to sign to get your keys. It's the rule book. It's your shield. It's the document that protects you and the landlord. Understanding what's in it is the absolute best way to make sure your entire rental experience is a good one. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you've got all this info, the next time you're about to sign, what's the very first thing you're going to flip to? The section on repairs, the termination clause, the security deposit rules? Because being an informed tenant isn't just smart, it's powerful. Thanks for watching.